You can go, you can have these open discussions. At least you should be able to. And even that was really being followed. But, you can't really say those things out loud. And I'm like, no, we have to say these things out loud. Like, well, I'm just worried about you. It's like, no, I'm not worried about me. I'm good, thanks. This is the problem. Is this has been we suddenly went back to this culture of silence, and that's not on. If you're saying things that aren't true, I'm going to call you out on it, and I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to back it up with receipts. I always fall back to policy. We work in a great space. The policies are guiding principle. So yeah, the general sentiment, like especially anybody, around my age, but like we just, every once in a while we just look at each other and go, like, I just can't believe it. Like we walked around like zombies sometimes.
And the first person I'm going to call is General Wayne Eyre, because he's got a lot of questions to answer. And we fully intend to have a room full of hundreds of people that have been affected by his mandate, and he is going to have to face them while I question him under oath.
Welcome to another episode of the Hard to Feel podcast, folks. I'm sitting down with Catherine Christensen yet again, and two other folks, two other gentlemen that one was released from the forces, and we're going to hear his story. And then we have Captain X, who's going to be talking about his experience as well through this whole ordeal during the COVID mandate era. Because the goal here, again, if this is your first time tuning in, is to share the stories of Canadian Armed Forces members during this COVID mandate era, to share their experiences, to give you an idea of who these people are, that they're not some other person, that they are literal Canadians going through awful stuff because the Canadian Armed Forces decided to throw its rules out the window and allegedly commit a lot of abuse of power. So Catherine is bringing the lawsuit against the Canadian Armed Forces to the tune of $500 million and representing 330 Canadian Armed Forces members. And we want to have as many updates as possible because, as we know, there is no coverage of this in mainstream media, and social media is a complete blackout when it comes to news. So if you are enjoying this content, I'm going to ask you to please hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and make sure to like and share as widely as possible and get these news stories out to Canadians. So Catherine, welcome back to the show. Let's start with some updates. Where are we at with the lawsuit, and what does it look like moving forward?
Well, we have now put the Crown on notice of how much evidence we have. Last Friday, we served them with the affidavit of documents. So this is essentially a list of the documents and evidence that we have. It was close to 150 pages. And that's not with 330 plaintiffs listed to bump up the page count. That's just a list of not a huge font either. So the Crown is now digesting just how many documents, recordings, affidavits that we have collected over the past 2 years. They've gone kind of quiet since we sent that. And within 30 days, they have to serve me with their affidavit of documents and tell me what evidence they have. So that will be interesting to see what comes of it. On the 2.0 lawsuit, which is the second mass tort for abuse of power, it has 128 plaintiffs. We are expecting the statement of defense from the Crown on November 14. They did ask for a 15-day extension, so I'm looking to see if they give us the cut and paste same defense they gave us on the first one, or whether they've been paying attention and they change it up a little bit. So then I get a reply, and we'll see if I get their affidavit of documents to them just in time for Christmas leave. Sorry, General Eyre. You may not get Christmas leave this year.
It looks like you got some work to do, General.
Yeah, ask me if I'm grieving if he has to spend Christmas working on another lawsuit. So we have that. Interesting update. There was a town hall with the Veterans Affairs Canada Ombudsman yesterday that someone I know attended, and they asked them why they are not covering vaccine injuries. And the response they got, I expected them to get a response of, well, we're looking into that, or the usual politician type of response. What they got for a response was, how would I know? I'm not a doctor. So I'm looking forward to bringing that vaccine injury lawsuit in the new year. We're just waiting for the first people who've been denied by VAC to go through the appeal process with the Bureau of Pension Advocates. And if they're not successful at that point, I then am allowed to bring it into the federal court to get coverage for vaccine injury. Because VAC is saying it's not service related, and I profoundly disagree. That if it's a mandated vaccine, that they should be paid for injury.
Yeah, Catherine, isn't that the biggest question that needs to get answered? They went down the mandate rule, forcing people to get a medical treatment. Did nobody think that if I mandate somebody and you have to take this for your job, that if there were repercussions, that clearly there's going to be a legal route for people to take? How is it possible that they didn't conceive of this? But you know what? I put a caveat, like a little asterisk to that. The briefing notes that I read, they did know that. So how are they able to even defend against the fact that people are saying, I got injured on the job because you told me I had to take this vaccine? And how is that any different than, hey, I'm an airborne troop, I got to jump out of planes. There's a known risk that my back and knee are probably going to get busted up, but it's for my job. How is this not for their job? How are they coming up with any kind of reasonable defense, which is completely mind-blowing to me, and it frustrates me.
Yeah, well, part of it is because they've divided up the Department of National Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs. So they've passed the buck to Veterans Affairs because anybody who's serving in the military and is injured for anything has to go through the Veterans Affairs process. You can't just go straight to the court. So they passed the buck over to Veterans Affairs, who conveniently said, well, no, we don't determine it to be service related. So then forcing it. Now, keep in mind that after Bosnia, operational stress injury or PTSD were not acknowledged as service related. And I was actually taught military law by the lawyer who took that to court and won OSI as a compensatable injury for veterans. So Veterans Affairs, you picked the wrong lawyer to say, oh, it's not service related and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, yeah.
Oh boy.
I was taught by the guy who broke the rules. So
they're in a bit of a Gordian knot now because of what they've set up. There's precedent that this needs to be covered. They mandated something that should never have been mandated. But I met the ombudsman 2 weeks ago. She's a veteran, actually. I was actually quite impressed, and it was a great interaction. But to throw your hands up and say, well, it's a medical, well, all the things you deal with are medical issues, aren't they? Because you're dealing with back injuries, you're dealing with psychological injuries, you're dealing with the whole gamut of things. So to say, like, I'm not a doctor, kind of seems like she's abdicating her role as the ombudsman, and that doesn't give me much confidence. The only thing that does give me confidence is that she is a veteran. So hopefully, and this is where I'm hoping that the people that have kind of had the blinders on and said, this whole era, I'm just going to move forward and not pay attention to the issues that are out there, because I've trusted my government for so long and I've trusted the institutions for so long. They couldn't possibly be this corrupt. But as it turns out, they are, and the allegations against them are devastating. And like we said in an earlier podcast, how does the institution even recover from this? And where do you see the next steps? And if you could comment on, just for the lawsuit in and of itself, like in the different directions it could take and the implications that it could have for the Canadian Armed Forces.
So there's a couple directions a lawsuit can take at this point as we're exchanging documents. So there's no smoking guns in Canadian courtrooms. I have to reveal what I have to support my case. They have to reveal what they have to support their defense. So there's no walking into the courtroom and putting something down on the table and saying, aha, I got you.
Like the gloves don't fit kind of thing. Like you can't do that.
Yeah. Not going to happen in a Canadian courtroom. Probably that evidence would get thrown out. So basically we're hitting that stage where the cards are on the table. The next phase for that is starting to call witnesses for depositions. So they're questioned with their lawyer present and under oath, and that transcript can be used against them later. I can't use my own clients' transcripts, but I can use the transcripts of the other side. And the first person I'm going to call is General Wayne Eyre, because he's got a lot of questions to answer. Now, the difference between depositions and the courtroom is that I can sit there for 5 days and wait for him to answer a question. You're not going to get that in a courtroom. So there's that. The other part of it is that the plaintiffs are allowed to be present for depositions. And we fully intend to have a room full of hundreds of people that have been affected by his mandate, and he is going to have to face them while I question him under oath. And he's going to have to walk through that crowd and face them. And given what they've been doing lately with General Whalen's court-martial and dropping General Cadou's charges, and some other events that have happened in the last couple of weeks, it seems like when it comes time for these generals to sit down or government officials to sit down and answer questions under oath, they very quickly, they don't do it. They pull the charges or they drop it and then they settle. So there's a possibility that if they don't want me asking the wrong questions or the evidence that I have getting out into the public, they're going to have to settle. That's their only way out of my revealing everything we have, because people have no idea what we have right now. It's bad. It's very bad for the Canadian Armed Forces. So then we can move into settlement, and settlements can be pretty much anything negotiated. They may ask for a non-disclosure clause. I may say, well, you could have one for 2 years, but you're not getting one forever. Then they could say, well, some documents we don't want disclosed ever. That would be up to my clients whether they want to agree to that, how much money is going to exchange hands. And hopefully we change some of the culture and, make them follow their own policies, basically.
Yeah. Hold them to account, set the precedent, set the tone for anybody else in the future. If they are even considering this, you're going to get hammered, and it's going to cost $500 million, if not more.
Right.
And if you're willing to go down that route, all right, let's giddy up. And like we said in other podcast episodes, this is probably going to inspire other lawyers. I don't know for a fact, but I would say that when you see something like this, an injustice like this, what it does is like the civil rights movement too. I'm not equating this with the civil rights movement, but it can definitely have an impact, right? So, Catherine, you're all right over there. So, because of that, we need to ensure that there's this accountability phase, and when we have that accountability phase, it's really going to ensure that we can see justice served, right? And you hit the nail on the head, and I appreciate you giving us some more context there. The Canadian Armed Forces has been showing up and dismissing cases essentially and settling. And if this trend continues, we could probably expect that in the future, because the evidence that you likely have or you allegedly have is way, way worse than if they were to settle. And I hope that's the case, but I guess time will tell. So thanks for the update, Catherine. Really appreciate that. And Logan, we're going to move on to you. Let's start with a little bit of your backstory. What was your career like in the CAF, and then what got you to the point where now you're sitting here talking to me on a podcast?
Yeah, so I joined the CAF in high school. Actually, I was in grade 11, and I signed up for artillery because my father wouldn't shut up about how great the reserves were when he was a kid. So my buddy and I went to the recruiting center and we signed up. And I did a year and a bit of artillery. And then, I finished high school and I thought, what am I going to do? So I thought, well, okay, I kind of like the structure of the military. So I'm going to join the military, but I'm not going to do an army trade. And at the time, I grew up near the Shearwater base. So we knew a little bit about the Air Force. And I decided to join as an avionics tech. So I joined as an avionics systems tech. I was posted out west, did a bunch of deployments and sales and this and that. And then I was posted back home to the East Coast. I was really happy to be home. It was the posting I wanted, my whole career. And, I was here a few years, and then the vaccine mandate came out. I guess, that's kind of just where it all started unraveling. So initially, when I first saw the email released discussing the mandate, immediately I disagreed with it. Not only because it was late in the game and most people who wanted vaccines already had them, and the worst of COVID was already over, but also because I knew the rules and I knew that this was against the rules. And I knew, based on previous precedent with the anthrax vaccine, that we did not have to take medications we didn't want in the CAF. I knew that was a rule. So I expressed those concerns to one of the officers. He was Samio, or Deputy Samio, just a young guy. And I told him, I said, hey, this is not legal. Like, what you guys are doing, it's not legal. It's not going to hold up. It's going to fall apart on you. It's going to backfire. And he dismissed my concerns. He said, oh, well, it's a lawful order. You have to follow it. So I decided at that time, no, I'm not doing it. I also had a number of subordinates and other young people who weren't my direct subordinates, but people who worked with me. They had a lot of concerns about the safety of this drug, because by the time the mandate came out, the vaccines were already around, like for a year, right? We had time to see what was happening. Some of the guys on our crew, one of the young guys was diagnosed with myocarditis after he got his shots. Another guy, I'm quite sure he had it. He was sick and lethargic for a long time. I think he got it, but he was one of the super pro vaccine ones, so he didn't go get checked out. Anyway, so I decided, I'm going to set a good example for these guys, and also just for myself, because I don't want this. So I drew my line in the sand, and I said, if they want to let me go, they're going to have to let me go. It's like, put your money where your mouth is and kick me out or don't, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so when the administrative measures first began, we were forced to test 3 times a week in the workplace, and they didn't do it in a manner that was private at all, which they should have.
What a surprise!
But,
what a surprise!
Yeah, no, of course. So they lined us up in the hallway, right outside the main door for the hangar, where everybody could walk by and see us. And of course, they did it right at shift change, so everybody could see us.
Were they doing the swab, or like how was that?
Oh yeah, tested? It was like the deep, like, shove that thing into your head one.
It was the nose rape. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we had to do that 3 times a week. At the time, I told my master warrant officer, I said, if I wanted to not do this, like, we wouldn't be doing this either, because I just told him, I was like, look, I'm not here to shoot the messenger, but you don't have the right to make me do a test any more than you have the right to make me take a needle. But I just kind of half-assed the swab and did the test, whatever. So it was only a few weeks of that before they decided. Our CO said, one CAD has interpreted this order as those who are not vaccinated are no longer allowed in the workplace at all. So all of us who were unvaccinated were sent home. We were just told, like, get out of here. Don't come back until you're either vaccinated or we call you back. So we weren't allowed in the workplace at all, except for to talk to the CO for our administrative measures. And he was right on the timings for all of those. Like on the day, he made sure. There was an aide memoir that was released. I don't know if it was supposed to be secret, but the military does a really piss poor job sometimes of keeping things secret from the troops. So a few of us, we found it. We saw what they wanted the COs to say and the timeline that they wanted them to release us. And it was all, the stuff he was doing was all copy pasted from that memoir. It was very lazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, I wasn't at work for quite a while, except for to bring in my representations to the CO. I explained to him this is not lawful. The National Defense Act does not give you the authority to do this. In fact, it very specifically says that people who have a reason not to be vaccinated don't have to do it. The QRNOs at the time clarified this. If you had, they quoted it as reasonable excuse, but reasonable excuse was loosely defined. They went on to define it as, religious reasons, health reasons, but it also says, or any other scruple. So really, if you just don't want it because you don't think it's good, you don't think it's good for you, that's totally fine. That's a reasonable excuse in accordance with the QRNOs. I showed him all this, and he didn't listen to me. He was like, no, it's a lawful order. You got to do it. I said, I told you very clearly, and I explained to you why it's not lawful. And he's like, well, it's coming down the chain from the CDS. It's obviously lawful. He's got, you sign up the dot. It was like you sign up the dotted line nonsense, So my efforts were in vain. I ended up getting released through the the usual channels through a 5F, which thankfully is not dishonorable, but it's not the most honorable way to get out.
Right.
And I even had some troubles on the way out the door. I got called in one day. I don't want to say day off because I was working, but I wasn't at work, kind of thing. I got called in. They said, "Oh, you need to come into the office for to talk to some warrant." I was like, "Okay, what's this all about?" And I get into the office, and he says, "Yeah, we're charging you with a 129 for your social media posts." I said, "What are you talking about?" And he showed me a bunch of screenshots that they had taken and printed off of posts that I had made, and he's like, "Are these your posts?" And I said, "Yeah, it looks like it." And
Yep.
so he showed me some paperwork. He showed like their disclosure, right? It's like, this is a 129. This is what it is. And then they showed me some administrative directive. I can't recall the number of it, but it was like, it had nothing to do with anything that they thought it had to do with. It was something for clerks or whatever. But it mentioned, it said members. Well, I'm trying to remember how they worded it. It was like, members must remain cognizant of their oath to the Canadian government. And I looked at him and I said, I never swore an oath to the Canadian government.
No, you swore an oath to the Queen.
Yeah, I didn't swear an oath to the government. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And then he went on a little further, and I told him, I said, my social media doesn't tell anybody what my job is. There's nothing military at all on my social media. I said, so you've no evidence to suggest that I've discredited the Catholic you're accusing me of. And I said, we still retain our charter right to speak freely. Like, you've no leg to stand on here.
Right.
And so he told me that he personally agreed with me and would be recommending that they drop the charges, because he wasn't the one who brought the charges. He was just some warrant. And so they did end up dropping those charges, which is good. But he told me that, he said, I have to escort you out of the building because you're unvaccinated as well. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. He's like, I'm not going to do it because, you've worked here for years, and, I don't see the reason to do this. And I told him jokingly, I said, yeah, don't worry, I'm not going to cough on anybody on the way out. But it wasn't too long after that I had to come back to clear out. And during my clear out process, I ran into the admin officer. So I went upstairs to clear out of the orderly room, and the admin officer, she comes barging out of her office, and she goes, Master Corporal, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm clearing out. And she said, you didn't take a COVID test. And I said, no, I did not take a COVID test, and I'm not going to take a COVID test. And she said, well, you have to. You're not allowed in the building without a COVID test. So I told her, well, I'm already in the building, and I'm not going to do that. So what are you going to do about it? You're going to phone the MPs? You're going to tackle me and drag me to the door?
Tackle
like,
me and jab you with a freaking swab? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, you're going to not let me leave the military? You're going to not let me clear out because I'm not testing for COVID anyway? So she ran off and went to the CO's office. She came back a few minutes later, didn't say anything, just went in her office. I received an email from my assisting officer, who was a warrant and was not very good at assisting. Excuse me. And he said that it had been passed on. He just forwarded it. It was a generic email from the deputy CO that said all members who are unvaccinated and are releasing have to make an appointment through us so that we can arrange for you to be COVID tested before you come in and clear out. And he forwarded that email to me. And I responded to him. I said, look, I've got 3 days left in the calf. I said, there is a 0% chance that I'm doing this. I'm not following this order. And I said, you can either delay my release with a charge because I'm not following an order, or you can just let me release and you'll never hear from me again and you can leave me the fuck alone. And he didn't respond to that. So I did end up releasing on the following Monday or Tuesday. And I showed up to my release in pajamas and slippers, and I said, yeah, give me the paperwork. I'll see you later. Yeah, that was it.
Wow, the most What talk about ceremonious? Depart with dignity, right? Just unreal, man. The more I hear these stories, it's just how, and that's the thing that boggles my mind. How captured does your mind have to be to think that somehow people that were perfectly healthy walking around your building somehow pose such a threat to your own personal health, even though they've been around you for weeks, months, years? Somehow you're a vector that is going to end their lives or their children's lives. Like the fear and panic that made people so irrational, I still haven't wrapped my head around. Because everything you're saying is cuckoo bananas land. You're literally in the building. What do you want me to do?
Yeah,
I'm here. Are you worried that my air is going to kill you? Is that really what it comes down to? Because you can't have that, well, your air is going to kill me. Okay, well, if that's the case, then there should be no entry in the building, even with testing, because you're going to die. So therefore, keep them out at all costs. Get your hazmat suits on. Nobody should be at work. But everybody went back to work because it was under the guise of, well, we're, safe. These safe and effective, treatments are going to keep us safer. I'm having such a hard time with that. And I want to know a little bit more. I'm curious. Your motivations, I think I know, well, I can't ultimately know what they are, but were they politically motivated or was it just really just health motivated?
You mean as far as like refusing, like why I refused in the first place?
Yeah. And the reason why I ask is because I think a lot of people, because the media took a stance that if for whatever reason you don't want to get this, you're some hard right fascist, which, I mean, personally, I didn't want it because, I went to school. I have a general knowledge of biochemistry. I understand things a little bit better than the gen pop. And after I did some research, I was like, I'll be okay. The numbers just don't add up. I'll be fine. And it's been a year and a half and I didn't die and nobody I know died and nobody I know got sick. I'll be okay. I'm just curious to know from your perspective. And the reason why I asked the question is just, is there a political motivation or were you just genuinely concerned that this is not a treatment that I need?
Well, I would say, allow me to sort of backtrack here, I guess, to around the beginning of COVID. When no one knew what was going on and everybody was afraid and they started shutting everything down. My workplace was deemed essential because we were the CAF had a shortage of pilots and we were maintaining aircraft for the training school for the helicopter pilots. So our CO at the time, who of course went home to work from home, deemed us all essential and we had to all go in and work. So we worked through the entirety of COVID. And, at first everybody was kind of scared, but after a little while, like you start to realize, like you see a couple people catch it and you're like, man, this is a cold, this is kind of it's not really that big of a deal. And I think really one of the things that drove it home for me, I don't know if you remember this or if anybody watching your show is going to remember this, but do you remember when that video leaked out of China and it was people like on the ground bleeding out of their eyes and ears?
They're doing the funky chicken. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, nah, fuck this. Like, this is stupid. Like I was like, it's over. Like in my head, I'm like, yeah, this is over. So already when the vaccine came out, I was like, I don't care about this. This isn't important to me. And then I thought to myself, well, you know what? Also, like I've said previously, is that you can always take it later if you change your mind, right? You can't untake the vaccine. So I thought, well, I'll just wait and see, wait and see how much it messes everybody else up or doesn't. Wait and see how effective it is, right? But as I mentioned earlier in your show here, the vaccine had been out for over a year by the time they released this mandate for the military. We already knew this wasn't preventing transmission. It wasn't preventing you from being infected. It wasn't preventing you from dying. But it did come with a handful of risks. And, while maybe those risks aren't incredibly common, they're common enough that, to me, it was a wash. Whether you get COVID or you get the needle, the risk is around the same. So why would I keep injecting myself willingly with something that comes with a similar risk to just getting the disease anyway? So so I drew my line. And then, maybe it became a little bit political later, but initially it was just, I don't want this. This isn't necessary. Like, I'm a young, healthy, fit guy. Like, I'm going to shrug this off,
Yeah. And man, I'm glad you said that. It's this abdication of our own personal responsibility to a organization that was supposed to be taking care of us. That is fundamentally the worst thing that I could possibly imagine. Oh, my health? Yeah, you can take care of it for me. No, it's my responsibility. If I decide, no, I don't want this, then too bad, so sad. Go pound sand. And this message needs to be hammered a lot now, because we've gotten to this point where people make medical decisions based on the political party they follow. And that infuriates me, because it doesn't matter who you vote for. Your health is your health, and you're supposed to take care of it. And I don't care if you want to take 6 injections. It's not my responsibility, not my problem. But yet, if we decided we didn't want something, oh no, you're a problem now. And man, it was such a terrible 3 years, and I don't know if we're out of it, but I hope stories like this help get the point home, and lawsuits like this help get the point home that no, we're responsible for our own health. And what one thing I just wanted to ask you too, post release, right? That's never easy, and like I said, it wasn't ceremonious. Were you able to kind of get back on your feet and carry on? Because I've heard some other stories, and they're awful, because getting released from the forces kind of unwillingly, because I'm sure you want to stay in. Was there an issue? Was there any issues there with keeping yourself afloat and making sure that financially you were okay?
I don't want to say that I'm lucky, but in a sense, I'm lucky that my trade in the CAF is a very transferable skill. Like working on aircraft, there's lots of civilian aircraft too. So aside from the lack of civilian certifications, having nearly 2 decades of aircraft experience made it relatively easy for me to find work. I did end up obviously finding a new job. I was only jobless for maybe 3 weeks. It wasn't too terrible. I took a tremendous pay cut. So obviously, it greatly affected my earnings, and I lost tons of years of pension that I intended to stay in and collect. But as far as actually finding work and not starving, it was reasonably easy. So the only thing that was a bit of a hiccup during that time, I applied for EI so I could get a few weeks of EI, because I didn't know how long I would be jobless. So I applied for EI, and it's my understanding, and it was the EI, the lady who called me, it was her understanding as well, that a 5F would normally qualify you for EI. But she told me that they had been specifically instructed to deny all EI claims that had anything to do with COVID.
Oh shit, really?
Yeah. I was at my new job when I was on the phone with that. I wish I could have recorded that. And she told me, she said, yeah, I can look into it for you. She's like, but the answer is going to be the same.
Wow.
She said, they'll deny it. Yeah. And I only wanted
that's a political motivation to cut the financial legs right out of you and make you
100%.
homeless and living under a bridge.
It's totally punitive.
That is really punitive. That is insane.
That
is awful to hear.
And it's frustrating too, because I paid into EI for 17 years. I couldn't collect it for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
I'm not asking for a lot here. But anyway, so I survived and I'm okay, but that was a real slap in the face. Yeah. Especially after, only being just fired a few weeks ago, essentially.
And from a job that's not just a job, it's you served. There's an implied contract between us that served and the government, and to boot you out and have somebody at some level, I guess it'll come out in the wash eventually, make the order to say, hey, these folks that are 5F, crush them. That is, wow. That is a
Yeah.
bombshell, man. Okay,
Oh,
and
it's huge,
if it happened to you, it definitely happened to others.
Oh, for
And
sure. I'm sure it did. I'm sure it
That's
did.
got to come out in the wash. All right. Well, that is
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing all that, Logan. Really appreciate that story. And we'll move on to Captain X, who's been waiting patiently. So, Captain X, I'm curious to hear your story. Yeah. Hey. So you've been waiting patiently. So yeah, time to wake up. Here we go. Let's start the conversation with what you can disclose. Just the main bullet points I want to hear, and I'm sure the folks at home that are listening want to hear. What brought you to the point now that you're inclined to chat on a podcast about your experience during the mandate era, and what led up to it?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so quick history. I've come at 18 to join the military. I was at the end of FRP, so I've got that experience, which is relevant to kind of where we're at today, kind of in the same state, but worse in some ways. Joined as infantry, but like I know that, especially for a troop, I was private, and it's coming to work every day with nothing to do. So I started going more towards technical side of things. I became a technician in the military, electronics side, Army side, so started with that. I was really happy with that change. And then as soon as I was qualified, I applied to join the special forces. As a tech, I want to be close support. Get into the shit with the boys. I kind of do all the stuff I joined the army to do. Right, you actually get to jump out of planes and repel out of helicopters and blow some stuff up. So it's great, but also still be a technician. So that was kind of thing. And I was happy doing that. I'm one of those people that they call a lifer. 27 years in so far. Again, 18 at home, 27. So like a lot of people, especially if you're looking at this long term, this became my family. And not relevant to this, but I had some issues early on in the sexual misconduct range. So I dealt with that, and that was rough, and now that's being dealt with now. The point of that is, it's got a little bruise, but sometimes your family abuses you, and you just kind of take it and you move on. That's what we do, right? We don't complain, we suck it up, we push it down, and we move on, and and obviously things over the years got better. We went from being a mushroom to tactical corporal, which was huge. Catherine talks about that a lot. I love that she's got all the lingo down. If you go into her office, all those phrases are all over the walls of the office. But anyway, so it was great. I just saw nothing.
Sorry, for those folks that don't know what the mushroom is, that analogy is you're kept in the dark and fed shit all day.
Yeah, trying to watch language, but yeah, exactly. And that was the thing, and it was so. Not only did you not know what was going on, so you couldn't be effective, but also rumors were rampant, and they wouldn't do anything to stop them, right? And then so things got better, and when these rumors happen, we realized, especially as leadership, you have to quell those rumors because it hurts morale. People don't know what's going on; they feel unsettled, and of course, they feel like their chain of command isn't paying attention because all these rumors are flying and nobody knows what's going on. So we really made, and I feel like we did a good job. Like I just saw the Canadian forces improve. Our view on the world stage was improved. So all good things. So I was, this was what I was going to do, to like 54, do 35 years and out kind of thing. So and then retire. So that was it, I love this job and I love it. Yeah, and I encourage everybody else, hey, if there's something you want to do and you can see your way doing it in the Army, join the Army. Do it for 5 years, do it for 10 years, get that amazing experience, and then move on with your life or be a life. So that was I just absolutely loved the institution, and just went all over the world with it. So so then this comes in, and that's actually getting commissioned at the time, and right before. Right before all this happened, roll this back to December 2020. Myself and my spouse, who I also met in the Special Forces, has a similar career path. We looked at this and we went, okay, all right, I know this is going to go, the first two ones are going to be the first ones available. We looked into it kind of thing, and we were from a religious standpoint. I won't get into it beyond this podcast, but we had very significant reasons why this specific one wasn't. So we're like, Novavax is going to come out. Eventually, it's a traditional vaccine. It's why we had taken other vaccines, because they didn't interrupt the natural body process. They just kind of, provided the body what it needed to defend itself. And so we're like, okay, no problem. We know we're probably going to be restricted from deployments. We're going to be restricted from maybe going on career courses. We're going to have to ride this out, but it'll be fine. You know, they're going to give us the time. We'll tell them right off the hop, this is the one we want,
Right.
and we'll just wait. You get to January of 2021, no vaccine even available, no mandate, and you could feel it. We were back to mushrooms. Like instantly, you could feel it. Everybody's scared. Everybody's worried they're going to lose their jump pay, or if we moved out of these high speed positions, you're maybe going to be like all these rumors, and nobody's talking, nobody's calling, nobody's talking. It's always, well, we don't know, well, we don't know, we don't know. Well, as leadership, it's your job to know. Give me some answers. But none were coming. So it was right away. I felt that old feeling from way back in the late 90s, and I'm like, okay, here we go. So, we have that. We did some praying on it. We looked at each other and we said, are we up for this? Are we up for this fight? Because once we started, you can't end, right? If you're going to start this fight and you're going to take the mRNA vaccine anyways, then you might as well just take it now and save yourself the career hit. But we're like, no, we're in for this fight. And like Logan said, I'm not quitting. You're going to have to fire me, and I'm not going to make it easy on you. I will fight you every step of the way, because I can clearly see early on that they were already violating policy, from privacy to putting things, to publicly shaming people already. Like right at the beginning, there's not even a mandate, and the abuses that we suffered were already starting. So that's what got me started on this road.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear somebody like yourself, who you have a good career. You sacrifice the body, you sacrifice where you want to live, you sacrifice a lot to be a member. Let's be honest, there's a lot of sacrifice there, but you also serve. And it sounds like you wanted to serve. And like you said, the Army is a great place to be, and it is, but it comes with, like you said, a family, and sometimes the families can be abusive. But were you shocked at the level of abuse that came your way? Was that something that you just weren't expecting? You can be prepared for a certain level of shit, but was this kind of like a flank where you didn't expect this organization to kind of go down this route?
Yeah, that's exactly it, and that's what really is the heartbreaking part of this. All of this is me. I'm not mad. I'm not angry. I'm not even upset. I'm heartbroken. To have, like you said, they made me this way. They saw in me somebody who was a critical thinker, who could think outside the box, work in the gray space, but still hold the policy. And then they honed that. They encouraged that. They spent, the courses I've been on, I can't imagine the amount of money that they spent on me. And I appreciated that, and I wanted to always use that and move forward. I saw that as the trade-off, right? You spend taxpayer dollars on me, wanting to give the taxpayers what they owe. But what, for me, how I always operate and how I'm always able to handle it, my way to deal with stress is I always think of any mission, any situation, anything where I know shit storms coming. I go, okay, what is the worst case scenario? What's the absolute worst that could happen? What's the worst policy? What's the worst violation they could do? And then I work back from there, and I go, okay, could I handle the worst case? Yes, I can. And then so anything back from there, easy to go, right? I think a lot of people do that kind of that mental preparing. So that's how you prepare. The problem with this one is they would hit the worst case scenario. And every once in a while, the best case scenario happens, the worst case scenario happens. This was the worst case scenario. Okay, got it. So then, got it, no problem. So what's the next down? What's the next possible worst case scenario? There's no way they're going to cross that line. There's no way. That goes against all the policy, religious accommodation, charter, all of these things. There's no way they're going to, and they would cross that line. And they did it. I think I stopped counting after four like major bounds of violation. Not to mention, of course, all the abuses that came along that, would be war crimes if we did it to a prisoner of war. Don't even get me started about that. I mean, that's what, we saw the airborne regiment, all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, that's really what it was. It was just this, I was not prepared to deal with it, and to have, like you said, all this training, all this thing, and it came down, and I sat right in front of my commander and said, so all these things, my resume, all this, none of this matters. None of it matters once I get this needle. He's like, yeah, and that's all we're going to talk about. I'm like, okay, got it. Thanks for your input. Thanks for talking to me. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier about being trained to be a critical thinker. And this is something that came up if you saw the episode with Dallas Alexander on the Sean Ryan show.
Sure did.
He said the same thing too. he was a JTF operator. He said, you train us to be hypercritical thinkers. We're warriors that can put 2 in the chest, 2 in the head, but we also need to constantly be analyzing and thinking. And then this came out, and then you expected us to shut our brains off. And you just reiterated that point again, especially in the soft world. Now, I'm not from the soft world, but I have friends that are and were. I know these guys. They are like warrior poets. They are the best that Canada can produce, in my opinion. And I'm curious, and I don't know if you can, speak generally, but is there a sentiment within the soft world that there is a large scale betrayal? Because if it's happening to you, it happened to a bunch of guys and gals, but is the sentiment that was created by these mandates a betrayal of kind of everything that they thought was part of what they had to do? So now there's a lingering sense of, if you want to call it, moral injury within that special forces world that is, it's like a cancer, because if you lose that, what's the point anymore? Are you able to speak to that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I will tell you that again, because they're small unit, because they're less number of people, we can actually implement changes pretty easily. And Cancer.com did actually just go through a cultural change. It was more on the piece of like, hey, like not everything's a no-fail task, like we're bringing other people. But of course, that kind of stuff came up, and certainly our discussions around the water cooler, because we're in a quiet space. You can't go publicly with this stuff. Now it's on social media, anyways. But you can go. But you can have these open discussions. At least you should be able to. And even that was really being called. But when you can't really say those things out loud, and I'm like, no, we have to say these things out loud. Well, I'm just worried about you. And it's like, no, I'm not worried about me. I'm good, thanks. This is the problem. This has been we suddenly went back to this culture of silence, and that's not on. If you're saying things that aren't true, I'm going to call you out on it, and I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to back it up with receipts. I always fall back to policy. We're within the gray space, but the policies are guiding principle. So yeah, the general sentiment, like especially anybody around my age, but like we just every once in a while we just look at each other and go, like I just can't believe it. Like we walked around like zombies sometimes, disconnected from your body, because you're just like, I just cannot believe we're in this environment, and I don't know what we're going to do about it. Because 100, as you know, like you brought up Dallas, and yeah, his exit was cold. Even a guy like me, that's cold. But that's what it was. We absolutely. I don't know what's in the head of people that are kind of still in and still doing the fight. It's which choice you have. I guess you just kind of hope for better days. But no. These are all critical thinkers. They're all calling bullshit. But then I have to call them out and say, yeah, but you went along with it too. And that's part of the heartbreak. Is like it really did. A good example I can give you is a lot of messes, like eating messes, barred people for the better part of a year. If you weren't vaccinated, you couldn't go in to have lunch with your comrades. And yet, I'll call out Edmonton specifically just because I had a buddy there, and he told me this. They tried it for one day, and everybody just basically stood up and said, "Yeah, you're not doing this," and they dropped it. So really, this is the biggest heartbreak is they just had to band together. Like, cool, you're saying these things, put it into action. I'm putting it into action. I'm putting my life on the line, like my livelihood on the line. I'm just asking you to do the same. And if more of us had done that, perhaps it wouldn't have gone so bad.
Yeah, I've heard in other conversations a lot of times, right? It's when you put somebody's livelihood on the line, and it's their family now, it's their mortgage, it's awful to think that you can be put in that bind where you have to make a decision that is not in line with your principles, but you're forcing your hand because you don't want to let your family down. And that was the intent, in my opinion. You're stuck with these golden handcuffs. Well, what else am I going to do? And on top of that too, you love what you do. You don't want to change careers. And from what I can hear, you had a great career and you don't want to leave. But if you have to put yourself in disalignment, that is a surefire way to create depression, anxiety, and a whole host of other issues that arise even if you're not being forced out of the military. So I can only imagine, what you guys are going through during a time like this. And to see it happen in the soft community is really troubling, because from my perspective, you guys are the best of the best. And if there's a representation of Canada, it's the soft units because you've sacrificed everything to get there. It is a crazy grind to get there. But yet the same policies applied and individuals can be just released on a whim without using policy. It just seems so heartbreaking, like you said, that you would just let your best warriors go and then create a culture of discontent and poor morale for a medical treatment. And yeah, I don't know where we go from here, but folks like yourself, like you said, you're principled, you're standing up for what you believe in. And if only more did that, because that's the fundamental issue, right? There's always more of us than them. And when we realize that, then that's when we have more power. And when we realize that we have the power, then we can go ahead and make the changes and push back as needed. And I hope that's what we learn from this is if any of this bullshit comes down the pipe again, because I think it will, what are we going to do about it? Have we all drawn lines in the sand, or are we just going to put our heads down and just go with it? My hope, part of doing this is to hopefully just allow for just more critical thought and for folks just to draw a line. And it doesn't matter what that line is, but start drawing those lines. And if somebody crosses them, like Logan, you're saying, they just kept on habitually crossing lines, and just it's hard to hear. And Cap, next, I really appreciate your insights into your whole ordeal and your current process of getting out. And I thank you for sharing that with us. So I'll shoot it back over to Catherine and get some final thoughts and what's up for the lawsuit and what it's looking like moving forward.
So one of the things that I wanted to point out was the defeat of the Conservatives' motion in the House of Parliament to remove COVID mandates is pretty much what all you need to know. It never went away. The mandate never went away for the Canadian Armed Forces. And of course, recently we heard about the travel mandate being challenged. And we're waiting to hear if the Federal Court of Appeal will allow them to go back into the federal court and actually argue that case. Because the government's argument is it was moot, the mandates are over, there's no reason. And I think the Houses of Parliament very clearly said, oh no, we intend to use them again. Because if they never intended to use them again, they wouldn't have defeated that bill. So I think we're going to see, I think we've got a failing government that's in a panic, and that's never a good thing
Right.
from a political point of view. We've got the world stage is becoming more hostile, and we've got a military that's not ready to defend our own borders, let alone provide troops for any actions overseas. The numbers I'm getting is that by the end of December, we'll only have 21,500 in the Canadian Armed Forces.
Whoa.
Which is almost one-fifth of what we should have in our forces. So I don't think if there was a major ice storm in Quebec this year that the Canadian Armed Forces have enough people to send to do it. So we're in trouble. Well, I watched General Eyre in committee go absolutely as white as the paper when he had to admit that if they used ammunition at the same rate Ukraine is using it right now, we have a day or two of ammunition, and it would take years to replace that ammunition because we don't make our own. So it's bad. The forces are completely, well, they're close to being completely destroyed. And in my opinion, it's going to take smashing it to pieces and then rebuilding from the ashes. I think that's what's going to happen to get the culture change we need and to also rebuild our forces, because we don't have a military right now, I don't think.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, that's very hard to hear, but ultimately it's been decades in the work. And as awesome as it was to see, I'll call it a surge during the global war on terror, I joined at the very beginning. So being a reservist, I saw kind of the shit end for a little bit, and then I realized, hey, things have changed. We've got more training, more gear. People are joining like crazy. And guess what? We actually get to fight a war. And if you're a civilian listening to this, you might think, well, why would you want to do that? Well, it was what I wanted to do. And a lot of folks that join the military, believe it or not, actually want to go fight war too. And I think that's often lost on folks. But having
the
served,
best description that someone ever gave me was that it's like the Olympics. So military members, they train and train and train and train and train, and then they get to go and use the skills that they've trained for.
Precisely.
Which is why deployments are so important from a morale point of view. And I thought that was an excellent analogy to describe to civilians why, having the skill set, having the equipment, and being able to go and do what you're trained to do is so important.
Yeah, absolutely right. I've used that analogy as well. It's good to practice, and we do a lot of it. And that fundamentally is a big difference between us and, let's say, police officers. Police officers do their literal job every day when they go out and patrol. We practice our jobs for years before we actually go out and do it for real. And that's where the intensity and the experience and everything comes into play. And that's how you keep a standing army fit to fight. And there's a lot of philosophical questions that need to be answered as to, are we keeping a standing army? Why do we need a standing army if we're not going to fund it, and if we're not going to train it, and we're not going to actually deploy it? These are all things that need to be answered now, because we're at that point where, yet, like you said, Catherine, the global situation is not good. If we don't have the ammo, what's the point? And what's our mission? Where are we going towards? And everybody I've talked to, that's it. They're leaving because there's no mission. If there's no mission, if there's no focus, and focusing on agendas that have no bearing on combat effectiveness are crushing whatever's left. And I think that's one of our biggest issues. And lawsuits like this in the last 3 years have kind of put one of the last nails in the coffin. And like I've said before, I criticize because I love it. And I wish and I hope that the organization is strong enough and represents my values enough that when my kids are older, it's an option for them. But for now, it is not an option whatsoever. Even if they say, I'm signing up, I will go to the recruiting station and rip those papers out of their hand unless the organization gets back to where it was. So Thanks for your insights, Catherine.
Well, and and what they've done with the chaplains, they're basically ripping the soul out of the Canadian Armed Forces, in my opinion. Literally. The chaplains, there's lots of people who are my clients who have said, well, the chaplains didn't stand up for us when we needed them to defend us for religious exemptions, and now they're coming for the chaplains.
There you go. That is exactly what Alexander Solzhenitsyn talked about in the Gulag Archipelago, right?
Yeah.
You don't say anything. You don't say anything. You don't say, oh, it's not me. It's not me. It's not me. And then they come for you. And then you go, oh, shit.
There's a very famous quote from World War II of a Methodist minister who said, first they came for, I said nothing. And then they came for me and there was no one left. And the chaplains are the conscience of the Canadian Armed Forces. They're outside the chain of command so that they can go to the CO and say, hey, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Think about this. And so now they're basically gutting the chaplain branch.
Yeah. Well, I guess all we can do now is watch and shoot, and in your case, hold people accountable. And I want to throw it over to Logan for some final thoughts as to what do you think is the way forward, and what are you going to do personally moving forward as well?
Well, we talked a lot. One of the things that Captain X touched on, we talked a lot about policy, and policy sort of is the guideline for everything that the CAF does. And I think we need to get back to a point where not only is the policy being followed, because it absolutely wasn't in this case, but that the policy inspires confidence, that we can trust, our chain of command, and that we can trust that people, I shouldn't say our chain of command because I'm out, but you know what I mean? Like, we can trust that the people who say that they're our family and they've got our best interests at heart and all this, you need to actually have that trust, because no one's gonna want to risk going and getting shot and dying and all this horrible stuff, getting injured, if they don't have that trust. And you talked about a mission, and I think you touched on a really great point. not only does it feel like we don't have a mission, but it feels like the things that we are turning into missions are not helping us as far as like combat efficacy goes. And this is something that I've noticed really, really bad before I got out, is unit cohesion is like out the window. We're not a cohesive fighting force, and I really worry about that because our enemies are. You know, you're going to go overseas. In theory, like if you look at who is the potential belligerent that you're going to have to deal with at this time, it's like you're looking at Russia, maybe China, maybe. Like both of those forces are like cohesive, will die for their community type of people, and we just don't have that in Canada anymore. And I worry about that a lot. I really do.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point. And like I said earlier, this is a problem decades in the making. And now that I'm a bit older, I have kids, got a few gray hairs. The philosophical point of view means a lot more to me. And I don't know what it means to be Canadian, because I don't think we've cultivated that as a country, and I don't think we've earned it. And that's the other problem. And what does that mean? I don't know. But I look to the Americans and I see their struggles, but I also see that it's also rooted in blood. It's also rooted in hundreds of years of struggle, and it's rooted in a framework that holds them together as good as it can. But I don't feel like we have enough of that here because we haven't really earned what we have right now. And by that, I mean like our Constitution, all these institutions that we have. And I think we've just taken them for granted for far too long. And
yeah,
I think is the expression, the hens are coming to roost. I think that's the expression. I think Catherine's from out west. She could probably help me out with that one. But we're starting to see what the repercussions are of a lack of unified effort, a unified country. We have a federation that is really distinct and different from coast to coast, which I don't know if it's a good thing anymore. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to look at deep down inside as to who we are as Canadians. So another topic for our podcast, I think, moving forward.
I feel that.
We'll tackle that one later. So Captain X, over to you. Love to hear some final thoughts and what you want to do kind of moving forward and where you see things moving forward in the future.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, all is not lost. First of all, I just want to say thank you, to you and any of the other associate podcasts. I know you guys there's a few of you that are in the group that like to bring this stuff to light, and it's the only way it's being brought to light. So thank you for that. I can't wait to see once this becomes more public, how your back catalog is going to light up. And to Catherine as well, of course. Obviously, our stalwart warrior. Like all I see in the chat all the time that we have is how many people are willing to protect her if needed. So that's you can lead by rank, or you can lead by convincing others to follow. And she certainly has encouraged us all to follow her down this path. So thank you for that. So I'll just close by saying, like my theme on this is the heartbreak, and the heartbreak comes from people like Logan and the other hundreds of people that are involved in this. I mean, of course, we're all broken people, or we wouldn't be here in the first place. And in joining us, one of the biggest things we talk about from an ethic, we're always talking about ethics, right? We're always hammering on that, which is always good in theory. I didn't realize it was so difficult. I just thought it was easy to move from theory to putting in practicality, as basic as, our basic code, which is, well, don't do illegal shit, even if you're ordered to do so. You can say no to that, and look after people. We exist to fight for those that can't fight for themselves, and that has to include our membership, because nobody else can understand what we've been through. Nobody understands. Like, and I'm talking the normal part of the job. So we have to be able to take care of each other, and so this really struck at the core of people that are in this lawsuit, and a lot of people that are still in, because, like I say, they got to pay the mortgage or whatever like that. Like, I can't imagine how hard it is for them to put the uniform on every day, because I know how hard it is for me to put the uniform on every day, and it's like I can go to a full panic attack just grabbing the belt kind of thing, and like, oh geez, I got to go into this again. So But there's still hope. This can be fixed. It's going to take a lot of time, and I think it's mostly going to be. And you're an officer, you got a bad troop. You got a bad troop. If everybody's hurting, you've got a leadership problem, and it's certainly in the senior ranks. When I talk to the junior officers, when I have them alone, I don't miss my words. I don't sugarcoat it. I tell them what's going on, uh, the fight they have in front of them, and so that they're prepared for it because it's their fight now. So I guess I just hope that this is all moving forward. I mean, I'm going to continue fighting from inside. I certainly fight for anybody because all of us still wear anybody that's still in. We certainly wear a scarlet letter, and I see promotions being held back, and I don't have to worry about myself. I'm at my top rank. I'm at least I just got to worry about the mission, the real mission, not what we're doing right now, and of course the troops. You got to take care of the troops. So I try to fight as much as I can from the inside with the time I have left. And as far as the lawsuit and all that we're doing and all that you're doing to help us out, I just hope this is an inspiration really to those new members, those new warriors, because this is their fight now, and it's going to be a long, protracted battle with no estimated end in sight. So, but we, in the words of where I come from, we will find a way. Hoorah! So I still have hope, but it's going to be messy. So thank you.
Cool. Indeed. I love it. So thanks for sharing that. It's always good to be optimistic, and I'm an eternal optimist as well. Only because that's just the way I was brought up, man. And the forces, although there's a lot of letdown, I never really lost hope, and I still have hope. And even though I'm not in and can't affect change on the inside, I still have a strong connection with those that are still in as well. And I know there's a lot of good people there. And this whole conversation isn't to shit on everybody. There's just individuals that were out of line. They need to be held accountable, just like we were going up through the ranks, never pass a fault. That's expected. And I think it's what we just need to do now. And Catherine's leading the charge on that, on the legal front. And I hope to see some changes through all of this. So thanks again, Catherine, Logan, and Captain X for your insights and your stories. And folks, don't forget, if you're enjoying this content and you want to see more, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. That's it from us. Don't forget, train hard, fight easy. See you on the next one. Peace. I hate t-shirts that get floppy in the arms after 10 washes. So that's why I created a bunch of t-shirts with high quality cotton just for you so that you can go to the gym and look fresh, sport some philosophy, and smash those PRs looking good. So you need to head to davemorrow.net/merch, grab yourself a hat, grab yourself a t-shirt, grab yourself a sweater, and support the cause today.